2 weeks ago, I sat at my parents' dining table with roasted chicken steaming between us and resentment hanging heavier than the air. I'm Eleanor Hart, 34 years old, and I thought we had gathered to mourn my grandfather. I didn't realize the evening had been arranged to corner me. I've always been the quiet daughter, the reliable one, the one who stayed close, who listened more than she spoke. My older sister Sloane was the opposite, confident, brilliant, untouchable, a corporate attorney with a sharp mind and an even sharper smile. Mom called her exceptional. She called me sweet. The difference between those words had always been clear. My grandfather, Gideon Hart, lived at Hartwood, a quiet stone estate surrounded by old trees and older secrets. The rest of the family visited like investors checking on an asset. I visited because he let me exist without explanation. In his library, silence wasn't empty. It was permission. He died 3 months ago. Mom insisted the will be read at home. When I arrived, the house was crowded with relatives who hadn't bothered to visit Gideon in years. They filled the rooms with polite voices and hungry eyes. This wasn't grief. It was anticipation. Sloane stood near the fireplace, wine glass in hand, speaking in confident tones about valuation and stewardship. Dad poured drinks and avoided my eyes. In the corner, Gideon's lawyer, Mr. Canning, sat quietly in his tweed suit, his leather satchel resting by his feet. He watched everything without speaking. After dessert, Mom tapped her knife lightly against her crystal glass. "We'll handle this privately," she said. The room shifted. Sloane stepped closer to me, her voice calm but firm. "Elena, be realistic. Hartwood needs leadership. Sign your share over. You'll be taken care of." They weren't asking. They were waiting for surrender. Mom placed her hand on my shoulder, as if sealing the decision for me. I lifted her hand away. No, the slap came instantly. Sharp, loud, final. My cheek burnt. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. Dad half rose from his chair, then sat back down, his silence louder than anything else in the room. Mr. Canning stood slowly. "Marianne," he said softly, looking at my mother, "do you know who actually wrote Gideon Hart's last will and testament?" The room went still. He didn't reach for a formal envelope. Instead, he pulled a plain cloth-bound journal from his satchel, the kind my grandfather always kept at his desk. "I executed the will," Mr. Canning said. "But Gideon wrote its decisive terms himself, and the person he trusted most helped him put those words on paper." Sloane let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "This is unnecessary theater." "It's protection," Mr. Canning replied calmly, opening the journal. He began to read. The words were Gideon's. Clear, precise, certain. Notes about my steady hands while cataloging fragile documents in his library. Notes about Mom asking him for financial advances. Notes about Sloane's newest can't-miss investments. And then the truth I hadn't understood until that moment. He had me sit at his desk all winter, believing I was organizing his archives. In reality, he had been dictating his will, and I had written it, word by word, without realizing the weight of what I was preserving. Mr. Canning closed the journal and looked directly at me. "Eleanor Hart is not merely an heir. She was Gideon's amanuensis. The original will is secured. Any attempt to challenge it will trigger an irrevocable defense trust Gideon established specifically for her protection." The room erupted into whispers. Chairs scraped. Voices overlapped. Sloane stormed out, the door slamming hard enough to rattle the glassware. When the house finally emptied, my mother stood near the doorway, her voice thin. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. I touched my cheek, still warm from her hand. "You never asked," I said. Before sunrise, I drove to Hartwood. The iron gate stood locked, cold, silent. Marco, my grandfather's groundskeeper, arrived. Minutes later, he stepped out of his truck and handed me a heavy skeleton key and a sealed letter bearing Gideon's familiar slanted handwriting. "Not before," Marco said gently. "Only after." In the walled garden, I opened the letter. Gideon apologized for the pain I would face. Then he gave me one instruction. Follow the catalog in the library desk. Start with the Eastern Woods. Plotty. Inside the library, everything was exactly as he had left it. The desk waited patiently. In its drawer lay our catalog, and beneath it, a single card in his handwriting. Start with Plotty. I walked east through bare oak trees until the woods opened into a quiet clearing. A small stone cottage stood there, smoke curling from its chimney. An elderly woman opened the door before I could knock. Elena, she said gently. I'm June Hart, Gideon's sister. Over tea, she told me everything the family had buried. She had been cut off for loving the wrong man, for choosing plants over prestige, for refusing to live according to their expectations. Gideon had built this cottage for her with his first real earnings. He had protected her when no one else would. He trusted you, she said simply. With the future, when I returned to the main gate, Sloane's SUV was waiting. She stepped out, dressed in confidence and anger. Mom sat inside, pale and silent. Dissolve the trust, Sloane said. Mortgage the estate. We split everything. I stayed behind the iron bars and held up copies of the will. No contest clause, I said calmly. Challenge it, and you lose everything he still chose to give you. Her expression hardened. He planned for this, I added quietly. He planned for you. I turned the key and closed the gate. That night, June and I signed the conservation easement Gideon had prepared, ensuring Hartwood could never be sold or divided. The next morning, Mr. Canning finalized the probate filings. Marco handed me additional keys without ceremony. June walked the land beside me, naming trees like old friends. At dawn, I planted snowdrops in the walled garden, small white flowers pushing through cold, dark soil. Fragile, persistent, certain. My cheeks still ached, but my voice didn't.